Arden Hills, Minnesota. A pretty young wife is shot to death in her home.
I saw lots of police cars. My mother was crying, my dad was crying in view of my sister lying on the floor.
The trail leads straight to her husband.
They looked at Mr. Pepin as the prime suspect because of the crime scene itself and the results of the polygraph.
But was he really a killer? The question would haunt detectives for 27 years.
This case was probably going to go unresolved forever. I don't think anyone was really working on it.
An unsolved murder that won't go away until cops get a second shot at justice. Next on Cold Clues. Arden Hills, Minnesota. Shortly after 6:30 in the evening. June 14th, 1972.
See the homeowner at 1924 West County Road, on a woman down.
Copy en route.
Officers respond to panicked calls from Gilbert Pepin, a local barbershop owner, that his wife is unconscious.
So I called emergency. That said my wife was on the floor and she wouldn't respond.
Officers find 26-year-old Phyllis Pepin face down on the floor of the couple's bedroom.
There was no forced entry and her keys were still in the door. She had been shot and apparently had tried to get away, and we shot several more times.
I saw lots of police cars, detectives ran into the home. My mother was crying, my dad was crying, and in view of my sister lying on the floor, I did see that.
Investigators then begin searching the house. What they find are clues that point to her husband, Gilbert, as the killer.
At the beginning, based on what was found out, he was a suspect at the time.
In the hallway leading to the bedroom, they see blood on the wall.
So I thought it could have been our dog injured.
Detectives assume it belongs to Phyllis, but Gilbert claims he thought it was animal blood.
So I got a sponge and just kind of wiped up a little bit on the spot. And after that, I went to check our bedroom. And that was when I saw her on the floor.
In the bathroom, investigators discover a stained towel and shirt. The shirt belongs to Gilbert. And in the bedroom, they notice a pile of Phyllis's clothes sitting next to an open suitcase, as if Phyllis might have been preparing to go away. It is the first indication of a motive.
It possibly would indicate that there were problems with her marriage.
I saw that there was some unhappiness that was kind of going around a little bit, and I think then I kind of caught on. My sister's marriage had its ups and downs.
When questioned, Gilbert's account of what took place earlier that day raises further suspicions.
They had gone out looking at a car that morning, and then she went home. He went to his barbershop. Distance between the barbershop and the home from St. Paul to Arden Hills, probably 5, 6, 7 miles.
Investigators reconstruct the timeline. They find that it might have been possible for Gilbert to follow Phyllis home, shoot her, and then return to work in time to close up as usual.
There was a time lapse in his time at the barbershop that he couldn't account for, whether it was a half hour or more. Yes, it would be possible to do it.
Forensic tests confirm the blood found at the scene was Phyllis's, and an autopsy reveals that she was killed by a .22 caliber handgun. But no gun is found, and a gunpowder residue test on Gilbert's hands proves negative.
As far as any other suspects, there was no one else that we could zero in on. Talked to neighbors, canvassed the neighborhood, and there was a delivery service that day. That checked out okay. The mailman, nobody else came into the picture.
We didn't hear of homicides happening, so this one was a very unusual one, to where when this took place it was a real shock to even Arden Hills.
The case against Gilbert gains momentum as investigators amass varying accounts that the marriage was in trouble. Phyllis's brother Tom says the couple argued over having children.
Phyllis Jean, she always went by Jeannie. And this is their home in Arden Hills. Gib prided himself in old automobiles and motorcycles. My sister Jean was going through cosmetology school, and that's how she met Gib. He was going through barbering school. After their 7 years of marriage, no decisions were then made about starting a family, and so my sister was not happy about that. And so there was things shared to the fact that maybe she might leave Gib.
Usually on an investigation like that, you start with the husband, the family, and you work your investigation outward. And there were certain things that were circumstantial, but that did indicate that Mr. Pepin was a suspect.
8 days after the murder, Gilbert is brought in for a polygraph test.
And if it would have turned out that he definitely was being honest, then they'd put their focus more on other people than on him. It turned out that he didn't pass it.
The evidence against Gilbert is compelling. The blood evidence, the polygraph test, and the holes in Gilbert's alibi. But the state's attorney concludes the case is too circumstantial to file charges. So detectives turn up the heat on Gilbert and wait for him to make a mistake. In a ploy to rattle Gilbert, they begin dropping by his barber shop unannounced.
I did talk to him the final time outside the barber shop, and I probably did push one of the officers into the car. I just told him that I didn't want to talk to him anymore about it.
How many
Despite their intensive efforts, Gilbert sticks to his story. By autumn of 1972, the case against Gilbert Pepin is stalled. Without any new leads and without the murder weapon, investigators reach a dead end.
When you work hard to solve it, find the criminal, and nothing comes up, yes, it's frustrating that you can't find the person that did it.
In 1983, 11 years after his wife's murder, nearly to the day, Gilbert Pepin is remarried.
And they said, how did it feel to be married to someone that was a prime suspect in a case? And I kind of took me back, and a suspect, I never thought he was. I just thought he was, a victim just like his wife.
We've never, to my knowledge, had a case like this lay dormant for so long.
The evidence still points at Gilbert as the killer. The gaps in the timeline the day of the murder. The blood Gilbert tried to wipe off the wall. The polygraph test. The signs that the marriage was in trouble. But the investigation is at a standstill. Then, July 1999, when a telephone call comes into the cold case squad.
I received a telephone call from Deborah Ellis, who is a public defender's attorney, and she had a client who wanted to speak with law enforcement officials about the Phyllis Pepin homicide.
This case, I'm sure that they would have considered ice cold. I mean, this case was probably going to go unresolved forever. I don't think anyone was really working on it.
Ellis says she has a client who may have been involved in the murder, but she won't reveal who or where this person is, only that they are confined in either a prison or a hospital, and had been a juvenile at the time of Phyllis's murder.
I think the call was a total shock to me. I've never had anything like that ever happen to me before.
Before Ellis's client will agree to talk, he wants a guarantee he won't get any prison time. The prosecution says no deal.
The county attorney did not want to see that happen. They wanted the person to have to serve some time.
So cold case investigators go into action, deciding to uncover the identity of Deborah Ellis's mysterious client on their own. Their first priority is to re-examine every aspect of the file.
I didn't know very much about the case at all. She was hit 4 times, but he actually had a couple misfires. See, the first...
Mann probes the recollections of the original investigators, including Dawn Dexter.
That's where she tried to get away.
Correct. She was originally shot back here where you see the first blood splatter.
Yeah.
Along the lower baseboard area. Then she crawled and went back to the master bedroom on the left where she collapsed.
Mann and Watson assume the mystery man is in prison. With help from the county attorney's office, they search the Minnesota penal records.
We began our list with approximately 350 names of people incarcerated in the state of Minnesota who would have been between the ages of 41 to 45 in the year 1999, which would have made them between the ages of 14 to 17 in 1972 at the time of the Pepin homicide.
Then violent criminals move to the top of the now shrinking list.
We started eliminating people in the top 2/3 of the state. We concentrated more than just in the metropolitan area, and then we dwindled it down further to just Ramsey County convictions, and the list just kept getting smaller and smaller.
To narrow it down even further, they decide to take a chance. They go to Gilbert for help, the man they targeted for 27 years. This time, he is interviewed as a possible witness, not as the prime suspect.
I had him look at the likely names from the list that we had categorized. He did not recognize any of those names. Hey, Doc, here's these photos from the Phyllis Pepin homicide.
But Mann trusts her gut more than Gilbert's memory.
We had to re-examine the whole scene just like from the start.
To eliminate more potential suspects, the investigators create a portrait of the Phyllis Pepin murder.
It shows where he was actually starting, the blood spots are smeared because he had begun to wipe it up before he actually noticed her there.
As a result, a new version of the events of June 14th, 1972 begins to emerge. One that seems to corroborate that Gilbert was not his wife's killer.
It substantiates a story about cleaning up, thinking it was a mess from the dog. There's a tight corner here, and he would have had to walk down actually to the bedroom door before he would have seen his wife on the bedroom floor.
They also conclude that Phyllis's open suitcase might not indicate she was leaving her husband.
Correct. That's the second bedroom, and she was unpacking because she just returned from a trip out to Arizona. So that's why everything kind of looks like it's just thrown there.
Other details are harder to piece together. The 30-year-old file is surprisingly slim.
I think nowadays we would take 5 times the amount of photos that were taken here.
Absolutely.
To depict a crime scene. Are very good for that time.
Some files are even missing.
The ME report saying that they pulled 2 bullets from her during the autopsy, which would leave 2 bullets somewhere, but not having those original forensic reports, I don't know if they pulled them from the flooring or somewhere in the bedroom.
The cold case detectives deduced that it had to be someone living in the Pepin neighborhood at the time of the murder.
It would have been on 2nd Avenue on the New Brighton side. Mm-hmm. So just a couple blocks away.
The killer's identity now seems to be within their grasp. Almost 30 years after her death, The central figure in the Phyllis Pepin murder investigation is no longer Gilbert Pepin.
He cleaned himself up, threw the dirty clothes in the hamper, and then cleaned up.
Cold case detectives Lucy Mann and Dave Watson are zeroing in on the identity of a new suspect. A prison inmate. Property records from the time point to one name.
We learned that one of the inmates fit what we were looking for, that he lived nearby around the corner from the Pepin house, and that he was 17 years of age at the time of the incident.
His name was Charles LaTourelle, already convicted for killing another woman.
He was due for parole in the year 2004 from his 1980 conviction of killing that St. Cloud University student. He's the type of person that lives his life best behind bars, and he's comfortable there.
A 30-year-old address is the only evidence linking LaTourelle to Phyllis. Mann and Watson need more.
We came up to Mounds View High School to view the old yearbooks. We also discovered he was a member of the Mounds View High School track team, and there was a photo of him on the team that we made certain to take a picture of as well. And later we also discovered that he used to run around the neighborhoods, including past the Pepin home at that time. I felt certain he'd run past her house purposely.
If LaTourelle jogged near the Pepin house, it meant he could have been nearby when Phyllis returned from car shopping. It's a hunch that Mann and Watson decide to play out. Mann believes she can convince LaTourelle to confess. In early October 1999, Lieutenant Mann and Deputy Watson arrive at the Stillwater Correctional Facility in Bayport, Minnesota, to face Charles LaTourelle for the first time.
Mr. LaTourelle was seated here. His attorney, Deborah Ellis, was seated there. Investigator Dave Watson was seated here. I was seated here.
LaTourelle describes the events of June 14, 1972, telling detectives details that could be known only to the killer.
The keys that were in the door was open, screen door was closed. There was a dog present. Where the bedroom was in the house, what the victim had been wearing.
No one knew for certain exactly how he fit into the picture until he told us that day that he was the paper boy for the neighborhood. We pretty much allowed him to speak from start to finish without interrupting him or asking him any questions. He told us that he was obsessed with Miss Pepin, and he watched her for quite some time before he decided to commit the crime against her. His intent at that time was to go in and sexually assault Mrs. Pepin. But just in case, to get his point across, he explained that he had a small .22 caliber handgun inside the paper bag that he was carrying. And that as he stepped through the unlocked screen door and stepped into the main entryway, she came from around the corner of the hallway. She immediately yelled out, "What are you doing here?" And he pulled the gun out of the bag right away. He ran after a couple steps, shot her right away, and she collapsed in the hallway.
Almost 3 decades after the crime, Mann and Watson believe they finally have what they need to convict Charles LaTourelle and exonerate Gilbert Pepin. On November 4th, 1999, Charles LaTourelle enters a St. Paul courtroom and receives 25 years in prison for the murder of Phyllis Pepin. Less time than Gilbert had to live with the grief of her death and the shame of suspicion.
My parents have been dead several years, and they never found out. My father-in-law is the only one that got the word just a matter of a few months before he passed away.
Today, Gilbert still cuts hair for a living. And every year when it starts to get cold, he still puts flowers on Phyllis's grave.
I think I said the longest prayers, and thank you told Phyllis, now we know what happened. Rest in peace.
He was certainly glad and relieved to finally have it done. I mean, I had the case on my desk for 5 or 6 months, and I felt good about it and felt closure. I can only imagine what he felt after 27 years.
Scandal tears at a Michigan suburb when a young wife and mother disappears from her home.
When we first got the complaint, I thought it was just a typical domestic where husband and wife have a problem, she leaves, a few days, a week later, she comes back, everybody's happy.
As suspicion mounts, neighbors turn against each other.
I actually told him at that time that I didn't believe him.
Investigators launch a desperate search for forensic clues.
We got down to the studs and pieces of the flooring were seized and analyzed.
Can cold case detectives uncover the final piece of the puzzle?
There are very few cases in America, homicide cases, that are successfully prosecuted without a body.
Cops get a second shot at justice, next on Cold Clues. In September of 1998, the cold case team of Kalamazoo County, Michigan is facing a mystery.
I put that in there, Michael. Yeah, these are our copies.
This newly formed squad of elite detectives is about to tackle its first case, the puzzling disappearance in 1994 of wife and mother Christine Smith.
Your first 72 hours are the most crucial. When you get beyond 72 hours, it kind of drops off the charts. But as a case gets old, that same chart starts turning around, going back up. And the whole theory behind that is with time, attitudes and allegiances change.
The case begins on September 30th, 1994. Detective Randy Dyloff responds to a missing persons report.
I went and talked with Russell Smith about his wife's disappearance, and his comment was that they had had a fight.
According to Russell Smith, his 28-year-old wife, Christine, ran off to Florida with another man, leaving Russ and their 7-year-old daughter, Candace, behind. He offers a Dear John letter as proof.
She had handed him a 3-page written letter, and she went up to take a shower. He followed her upstairs. They had a verbal argument, and he left, and when he came back, she was gone. When we first got the complaint, I thought it was just a typical domestic where husband and wife have a problem, she leaves, a few days, a week later, she comes back, everybody's happy.
Weeks pass with no word from Christine Smith, no phone call to the daughter she abandoned. By mid-November, Detective Dyloff begins to suspect foul play.
We started contacting the neighbors, and the stories that the neighbors were telling us were a little bit different than what he was initially telling us when she disappeared.
The story that we had was she left with another man. When he said that, I said, well, her car's here. Well, she walked down the street. The other story he said was somebody picked her up. And I think there was another story where a cab came and got her. So there was a lot of different stories.
I had a hard time grasping onto the theory that she had left without her daughter. I think it's normal that some of us sometimes could leave for another man, but not without our daughter, especially with the kind of mother that she was.
Investigators' suspicions are further fueled by a sudden and drastic change in Smith's lifestyle.
After Christine's disappearance, Russ's whole behavior and character changed. He started hitting the bars and the strip clubs, and this Country Palace is one of the places where Russ frequently came to.
Less than 2 months after his wife's disappearance, Smith files for divorce, buys a new car, and even takes out a personal ad.
It reads, "Big flirt, quiet, adventurous, single white male, 34, 6'1", 185 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes, employed, enjoys boating, golf, beach walks, seeking self-sufficient, happy single female."
A background check reveals more provocative hints about Smith's personality. That Smith was once a police officer with a wild jealous streak when it came to his wife.
There was some real anger that he had towards her. There was a man in the Portage area that, according to Russ, Chris was having an affair with. And matter of fact, Russ had called and threatened to kill this guy.
Neighbors continue to supply Dyloff with accounts of Smith's questionable activities. Piece by piece, the picture of Russell as the grieving husband begins to crumble.
Tim and Debbie Orrs lived directly next door to the Smiths, and because of that, they had the best view and observation of activity at the Smith residence, and they kept me informed of almost daily or weekly activity of what was going on and coming and going at the Smith house after Chris's disappearance.
The first thing we really seen was a 55-gallon drum in the back of this truck.
The drum isn't the only thing that raises Tim's suspicions. He also sees a boat in Smith's garage.
And I know Russ didn't have a boat, and just 50 million things go through your mind.
When I talked to him, he denied ever having a boat or remembering a boat that, that there was a boat that was there. Russ admitted to me that there was a barrel in the back of the truck, but that it had some belongings for a pet rabbit that they had.
As suspicions mount, Dyloff gets a bad feeling.
4 to 6 weeks into the investigation, with inconsistencies from Russ himself and talking with neighbors and other events involved in her disappearance, we soon realized that we were dealing with a homicide and not just a typical missing person.
With no body, not even proof a crime was ever committed, all Dyloff has to go on is a hunch. His investigation comes to a standstill. Until December, when a neighbor's tip prompts Dyloff to track down a local plumbing contractor. He discovers that the man helped Smith remodel his bathroom, including replacing a broken shower door only days after Chris disappeared.
Russ told me that he had not damaged the house or the bathroom in any way. We found out that he had remodeled a bathroom, totally remodeled the bathroom. This is in a 2-year-old home, which is extremely suspicious.
Armed with a search warrant, Detective Dyloff goes to Russell Smith's home. Will he finally find the evidence to unravel the mystery of Christine Smith's disappearance? January 1995. Christine Smith has been missing for nearly 4 months. Investigators believe she was murdered by her husband, Russell. They have no body and no real evidence of a crime, but they also have nothing to indicate she's alive. They search the Smith home and videotape what they find inside.
There's the front door. You can take a left coming in the front door. You'll come into the living room area.
Of particular interest to Detective Randy Dyloff is the upstairs bathroom, the last place Chris was seen alive.
We were able to confirm that the bathroom had been totally remodeled. There was new flooring that had been put down. There was also a photo album that we had found. Here are 2 bathroom pictures. This one is before, and this one is after. And as you can see, he's standing almost in the same position. This is the picture that Christine took, and this is the picture on the right is the picture that Russ took.
A quick search of the bathroom fails to turn up any evidence of murder. But in an interview with Smith's 7-year-old daughter, Candace, Dyloff gets his first hint that his suspicions are correct.
She said it was a terrible mess. Some of the wall had been taken off, the tub and shower was all busted up, and that there was blood in the sink. We drew up another search warrant and went back into the house a second time, and this time we did get into removing some of the wall, some of the flooring, looking for any evidence related to Christine, be it blood, hair, fibers, anything like that.
The second search of the home again fails to turn up any forensic evidence. But police do discover merchandise stolen from Smith's employer. Within days, Smith is arrested and charged with embezzlement.
It was another leverage that we felt we had that we could put on him.
While transporting Smith to the county jail, Dialoff has what turns out to be a fateful conversation.
I said to him, Russ, when's this going to end? It's more than just to do with this embezzlement. And he said that he was aware of that. He said that he would be willing to deal with the disappearance of his wife, but he wanted an appropriate charge. And I asked him what he felt an appropriate charge was. He said manslaughter.
Dialoff promises to talk to the district attorney. He also arranges to meet with Smith again the following day. Only this time, Dialoff goes in with a concealed tape recorder.
I wish there was some way that you and I could just sit down and write it out like a sign it. And be done with it. It would be so easy. I do too, Russ. I wish I was the one that could say, okay, you write it out for me. We'll put manslaughter on it and we'll be done. And it's not changed at all from yesterday. That's exactly what I want. So you would be willing to take 2 to 7? Open the door and I'll walk right there right now.
After my conversation with Russell Smith in this interview room, there was no doubt in my mind that he in fact had killed his wife, Christine.
But when prosecutors refuse to offer Smith a deal, he clams up.
I told him that we would have to have his full story to go to the prosecutor's office before they would be willing to make any type of deal. And he was not willing to do that.
Dialoff revisits neighbors' accounts of a mysterious boat and 55-gallon drums seen at the Smith home, and that Smith had been seen on Gulf Lake the weekend that Chris disappeared.
The countywide dive team went out on 2 different occasions and searched Gull Lake in an attempt to locate a barrel or a body.
But the search turns up nothing. Dialoff's efforts to prove Russell Smith murdered Christine lead to another dead end.
I knew that Russ had killed his wife and that it was just going to be a matter of time before he was going to have to deal with it.
It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Russ Smith was the killer.
The team faces an uphill battle. Smith has long since relocated to Florida. There is little physical or forensic evidence against him, and Smith's own incriminating statement is inadmissible. Even worse, police had never proven that Chris was actually dead.
We had 2 guys that for months did nothing but work on the corpus delicti, which is to prove that Christine is dead. They contacted every agency in Canada and Mexico to show that there had been no activity, no application for any kind of credit, driver's license, social security activity, credit activity from that weekend forward. And we have boxes and boxes and boxes of information. We needed to prove that she was dead.
In the meantime, Chief Weston and forensic investigators return to the former home of Russell and Christine. Once again, the focus moves to the remodeled upstairs bathroom.
We knew that was our crime scene, that bathroom. When we went to the bathroom, we figured, why would you replace that shower unit? There had to have been a reason. And based on the fact that this is a new house, we came to the only conclusion that the weapon must have been a gun. And it was something that went through the body, went into this fiberglass. Had he patched it, we would have found that. So it had to be removed and replaced.
This case, we tore up the entire bathroom. We got down to the studs, and pieces of the flooring were seized and analyzed.
This is a slow process, and this is some laser light, special lighting that the lab people are using is because we're trying to locate trace evidence. And when we look for trace evidence, especially in a case such as a shooting, you could get blood splatter anywhere.
Forensics locates a stain that appears to be blood, but again the results are disappointing. Tests reveal that the stain is actually rust. So investigators change tactics. Rather than rely on forensics to get Smith, they will outsmart him. They leak word to the press that they've found a bloodstain. The strategy is intended to up the pressure on Smith and members of his family.
One of the things that we try to do on our team is build relationships with people that we consider to be key or have stronger probabilities that they're going to have information that's going to be useful to us.
Cold case detectives target the people closest to Smith: his friends, his parents, even his daughter Candace. It's a technique known as warm and fuzzy.
We kept contacting the family, we talked with his daughter, and then we would come back and do it again and do it again. And we anticipated that they were letting him know.
Now, this tape right here that Mr. Dialoff did back in '94 of an interview with Russ where he made some specific admissions of his involvement with the death of Chris Smith, became our number one tool in our tool chest to convince his support group that Russ Smith was a killer.
Don't think I don't want to just independent before anything more than anybody. Can I do manslaughter? Yes, absolutely. Open that cell door for me today. Open it up. And we'll walk in.
The tactic pays off when one of Smith's former girlfriends decides to talk. She's even willing to write a letter detailing what she knows.
Basically what it did was describe conversations in two different phases that Russ's girlfriend had had with him, whereby he described to her, number one, that he killed her and how he disposed of her body.
Armed with the letter, Weston and Workema head to Florida. They begin tailing Smith. When he pulls into a local post office, Weston waits for him to come out.
When Russ walked up to his car, I was standing there. I extended my hand and introduced myself and said, "Hi, I'm Dan Weston. I'm a cop from Kalamazoo." And he said, "Yeah, I know." They'd had an argument about breaking up, and that Christine was going to leave him and take their daughter. His explanation was that just enraged him, and he wasn't going to let that happen. He left the room, got a gun from the bedroom of the home, came back, and he shot her twice.
On December 14th, Smith is placed under arrest in Florida. Then, during the 16-hour drive back to Michigan, Smith reveals the chilling story of how he disposed of his wife's body by putting her in the 55-gallon drum spotted 4 years earlier by neighbors Tim and Debbie Orrs.
How did you fit her into the barrel? No problem. Picked her up, put her in. Cut her up? No. She was that big of a person. You drove around with that barrel in the back of your truck for 4 days? Seemed like an eternity.
When he finally told us that he put the body in Lake Erie, he told us out of shame. He didn't want to tell us Lake Erie because that was his father's favorite place to fish.
After nearly 5 years, the disappearance of 28-year-old Christine Smith is finally solved. It is a welcome relief to Randy Dialoff, the original detective on the case.
For the cold case team to finally bring this thing to a close, it was a real major relief. I didn't believe that it would be 4 years like it was.
On January 25, 1999, Russell Smith pleads guilty to second-degree murder. He is sentenced to 30 to 70 years in prison. Despite repeated searches of Lake Erie, Christine Smith's body has never been found.
Randy did an immense amount of work. I applaud him for his tenacity. I mean, he never put this away. This was not justice denied, it's justice delayed.